Right. So if you go to the Piazza and you click on resources, you'll have a little bit what my schedule is and my office hours. And here you have a resources tab. You have a link to the course website, which we've been looking at. That's where the syllabus is. That's where the agenda is. The link to the assignments. But here you also have the link to the assignments as well. Okay, again listed here for your convenience. And right now we're doing assignment number 1. When you're done, when you push your GitHub, when you're about to deploy, make sure you tag, make sure you create a release called assignment number 1, assignment 1, so that we know that that you have completed it. Down below you also have a link to the project requirements, which I'd like to go over those now. We're way well, not that way, far out to start the project, but again I'd like you to get started thinking about it right away. So let me just go over the requirements and see if your ideas might fit here. I think it's general enough that might work. So here are the minimum requirements. Obviously you're welcome to go beyond. So first of all, it needs to be hosted on Heroku or AWS or some remote server, obviously. And here are some of the requirements. You have to identify at least 2 types of human users that would use your type. 2 types of users, okay? Not 2 users who are 2 different users, but 2 types of users that have different roles, right? So for instance, here are some examples for different applications. If it's an online store, there might be a seller and a buyer, okay? If it's a project management, you might have developers, you might have quality assurance folks, you might have project managers, you might have business analysts. On an online restaurant, you might have cooks, waiters, delivery boy, receptionists, managers, owners. These are all users who might want to use your website, right? Your application, okay? And each one will have a dedicated user interface. If I log in as a buyer, I will have a different user experience if I log in as a seller, right? If I'm a buyer, I can create online stores. I can add products to my online stores. I can remove items. I can change the descriptions. I can change their quantity, their prices. And if I'm a buyer, I can't do any of those things. Yes? Okay. A particular person can only be in one role at a time, right? So don't ask whether some person can be in both roles and can they see everything. Right, that defeats the purpose. Right, the idea is that depending on the role, you hide or show different things, right, and you protect certain things but not others. Right, that's the complexity. Right, that if you are a buyer, right, then obviously you won't be able to navigate to certain things. But also, if I try, if I'm a buyer and I am also an ingenious hacker, I won't be able, with a role of buyer, I won't be able to hit the APIs for somebody who is a seller. I can't change the price, I can't change the description, the quantity, I can't do any of those things. Even if I can post and put and get and delete things through my HTTP. If I know how to do that, I could. But the role drives what you see and what you can do or you can't do. Make sense? All right, that's the complexity. That's why it's important to identify 2 types of users. If you're oftentimes I get the question, but I can't think of 2 types of users. Okay, so for instance, somebody might say it's an online restaurant. What other type of user could there be but somebody who wants to go to a restaurant? What other types would there be? Certainly a manager could be a type of user, right? I could run a chain of restaurants. So oftentimes the question is, but these restaurants already exist, right? This is an actual McDonald's, right? This is an actual Burger King, right? I can't be the manager of something. So yeah, but that's the thing, right? So you should be able to, perhaps you could say, log in and say I am a manager, and I can say that I am the manager of that particular restaurant, right? So your application should be able to simulate that, right? That a particular person has claimed to be the manager of that particular restaurant. Right? That's not very uncommon. Google has this, right? If you find a business on Google and it hasn't been claimed, you can claim that business. You can say, yeah, that is my business, right? There is obviously additional parts to that process. Google will try to contact you and verify that you are the owner of that business, right? But that's the boring part, right? We're not going to deal with that. But the part where you can actually claim things here and there in real life, that's interesting, right? You can say, yes, I'm the manager of all these restaurants in the area, right? And as a manager of all the chain, any reviews, bad reviews, perhaps that my clients might have, I read those, right? And I can maybe give them a free lunch, to compensate for their bad experience, or I might interact otherwise with my clientele. Make sense? Right. So yes, there's always other types of users that you can simulate. Sports, you could be a player, you could be a fan. It says, or you could be a coach, you could be a director, you could be a spectator. Each one will have different user interfaces. So you have to come up with at least two. Choose two. All right? And the interface needs to adapt to who you log in as. Admin role. So in addition to those two types of users, there'll be somebody with an admin role. Okay, so you should be able to log in as an admin and have superpowers, right? You should be able to create other users, remove users, see all the users that are logged in, right? Or have registered with the website, right? Maybe you can ban a user for not behaving, and so they should have all the CRUD operations available for all users. CRUD is a short for create, read, update, and delete. Those are the four main operations that you can do with any piece of data. Yes? So they should be able to create, read, update, or delete a user. I'll say users. They should also be able to CRUD any domain object. Okay, so if this is an application about movies or restaurants or something, right? You will have in your database stored actual movies, actual restaurants, actual sports, whatever, right? The admin should be able to remove these things or update these things, right? Now the admin's user interface doesn't have to look as pretty as an end user, right? So these over here, the seller, the buyer, these are all end users, right? These are, if you're on eBay, you have buyers and sellers. They both use the eBay application, yes? But nobody can see who's logged in or list of their users. They can't do all those things, right? Only an admin can do that. Okay. So the admin is using an application that is inwards facing to the corporation, right? To whoever implemented this. Yes. Their user experience is not as important as the user experience for an end user. Yes? Make sense? So the application has to face outside of the corporation and needs to face inside of the corporation. Yes? Right? So whoever's outside, the Facebook users, the LinkedIn users, the Twitter users, right? Those are all outside of Twitter. Inside, you have all the admin folks, right? That can read can they read everybody's posts? I don't know. They should be able to have godlike powers about all the data structures. Yes, So that's the admin role. Anonymous user. Somebody who hasn't logged in is not a type of user. Okay, so that doesn't count. So if I haven't logged in, I don't know if you're a buyer or a seller or an admin, right? Not until you log in. But even though I haven't identified myself, I should still be able to use the application to some extent. Okay. Obviously, with some, a lot of reduced functionality until I identify myself. If it's a movie application, I should still be able to search for movies, right? And I should still be able to read reviews and plots and look at the videos and pictures and whatnot. Yes. Not until I need to know who you are do I force the user to log in. Okay. If you don't need to know who you are, do whatever you need. I just won't let you go in through several places, right? But if you need to, if you want to post something, or you want to like something, or if you want to review something, then I will ask you to log in to know who you are. Make sense? But not until that the user should have some public access. End user role requirements. So the end user. Okay, there are two roles. Wait, let me see. Oh, okay. All right, so if you're an undergrad, it's only one role. If you're a graduate, there's two roles, right? And you can team up with other folks in the class, but for every additional team member, you have to come up with an additional role, right? So if it's just you, then you just have to come up with two roles. If it's two of you, you have to come up with a third role, right? If it's three of you, you have to come up with a fourth role. Make sense? That just adds complexity, right? For each additional person you add to your team. Make sense? All right. All right, data model. You need to model all the data, right? You need to create schemas, and you need to create placeholders for all the data that you're going to store in your database, right? You need to create a data model for the user, right? This is going to contain your username, password, first name, last name, date of birth, everything that pertains to a user. Yes? Right? All the personal information for that particular user, including a role. What roles are they in? Okay. A person can be in two roles, but not at the same time. Right. So I could be a person who I can log in as a faculty, right? Or I could log in as a staff member, maybe. Okay. If I log in as a faculty, I can change grades, I can create quizzes, I can create, right? But if I log in as a staff in a registrar's office, right, I can't change grades, I can't create quizzes or anything like that. Make sense? Physically, I'm the same person, but I can only be in one role at any one time. Or if you want to provide an easy way to switch roles, right? Yes, maybe you can do that. Maybe like a switch or something, or maybe in your profile there's a switch that changes your role. But your API, your user interface has to be very clear what role you're in. Make sense? Right? Domain objects. So these objects are objects depending on the domain that you choose. Right? If it's a movie application, a domain object could be a movie theater, an actor, right? Any a review, a comment, things like that. Right? Those are all domain objects. So you need to create at least two domain objects. Then you need to create relationships between these things, right? A relationship between a user and a user, right? Maybe a user follows another user. A user, maybe you have a manager and an employee, right? So there's a relationship between employer-manager relationship, okay? Or a person sends a message to another user. That's another relationship, right? Something that it's an object that needs references to two different folks, right? To two different users. Yes. Also, another relationship between a user and a domain object. Okay, maybe I like a song, so that's a relationship between a user and a domain object. Okay, so you need to create a relationship between the relation is called likes, the user, and then you have a domain object song. Yes. Also, a domain-to-domain relationship. So you have two domain objects. The two domain objects somehow need to be related to one another. For instance, a playlist and a song. Right? I can create a playlist, and that playlist can have many songs in it. Yes? Or favorites list, right, of movies I want to see, right? Or shopping list, or a whatever, something that relates the many objects together. Yes? Right? There has to be at least one-to-many relationship. Right, one-to-many meaning something that is related to many things, right? One user to many playlists, one playlist to many songs. Yes, there has to be at least one. At least one many-to-many. Okay. For instance, one person can review many movies, but one movie can be reviewed by many people, by many users. Yes, that's a many-to-many, right? Reviews is a many-to-many relationship. Here are a couple examples on different types of projects. Here we have a class diagram. I think the second or third week or fourth week, I don't remember. I asked you to provide a class diagram for me. It doesn't need to be. It can be preliminary. It doesn't need to be completely finalized. I'm assuming that it will change as you actually implement it. Okay, there's no need to go back and retrofit the UML class diagram, but I like to see that it's fairly fleshed out, right? But I expect that it will change by the time you actually implement it. But here's an example of a person who has taken either 3200 or 5200. Anybody? Some, very few. Okay. That's databases, data modeling, creating entities, relationships. No? Okay. All right, so look this up. We'll go over it again in class. But basically, each one of these squares, rectangles, represents a class. Is everybody okay with object-oriented programming? Yes? Everybody feels okay with object-oriented? Okay, well. The mapping here, I guess, would be as easy as each one of these boxes represents a class, and this is UML. This is a standard way of documenting classes and their relationships amongst themselves. Here is a base class, and here is a inheritance. So this is a user of type 1, inherits from a base class of person. Right, and here's a user of type 2, meaning two users, two different roles, right? And they have an association, they're associated somehow. This is a generic UML class diagram. Do not use this as an example to build your own. It's just that this is broad and generic enough that should fit most of the requirements that I'm listing here. Here's an association between a user and another user, like a user follows another user. That's a many-to-many. A user can follow many users, and one user can be followed by many other users. That's a many-to-many. Yes? Here's a domain object with a one-to-many relationship with a domain. That's what the diamond says. There's a one-to-many between one user and a domain object. So one user, many domain objects. Here's a one-to-many between a domain object and another domain object. Okay, one domain object has many domain objects. Like a playlist has many songs. So one user can create many playlists, and each playlist can have many songs. Yes? You can have relationships between domain objects, like a review, right, or comment, or lyrics, right, like relationship between domain objects. You can have a self reference. This is used for creating hierarchical relationships, like a catalog. Where you can have categories with subcategories with subcategories with subcategories. right? These types of recurring relationships allow you to create all those hierarchies. Again, this is very generic. This is very, very generic. Here are some specific instances for instance, a store and products. We have a person, we have a buyer and a seller. And the buyer sends messages to the seller, or the seller sends messages to the buyer. A buyer follows another buyer. A buyer can review a product. A product has a hierarchy of products, subproducts, sub-subproducts for categories of products. Yes? A seller can create many stores, and each store can contain many products. Okay? A buyer can review many products, but a product can be reviewed by many buyers. Okay, so here's examples of several many-to-many, one-to-manys. All right? So here's one a particular example. Here's another one. Here's a student and a faculty, and they're both persons, so they both inherit. This says inherit. Right, so a student and a faculty, they both inherit from person. They can message each other through Piazza, through whatever. And we have here an enrollment. Here's a many-to-many enrollment of a student enrolled in many sections, and a section having many enrollments, many students enrolled in it. So it's a many-to-many, right? Here we have a faculty teaching many sections, right? Or a section being taught by one or more faculty, right? So that's a many-to-many as well. The faculty can author many courses, but a course can be authored by more than just one faculty. Okay, so there's some examples. And this is the extent of what I would expect from your project, right, of creating these types of diagrams. And I believe it's the third or fourth week I expect you to have an idea of what these class diagrams might look like. Right? Typically, these class diagrams have attributes next to them, listed here, all the attributes, and also their data types, whether they're strings, they're dates, integers, floats, arrays, whatever data types there are. Right? And I would expect that you would show that as well. Here I'm not showing it, but I would expect that you would. Here's another example. Here we have like an art place, right? That you can have artists that create a portfolio. So one artist can create many portfolios. One portfolio for their photography, another portfolio for their video, another photography for their hand drawings, different portfolios, right? That they're going to submit. Each portfolio can have many art pieces associated with it, so the artist can organize their art pieces into many different portfolios, and they can exhibit those pieces of art in different exhibitions. There's a curator who curates many galleries, and a gallery can host many exhibitions, right? And each exhibition can have many art pieces in that exhibition. Yes? Art pieces can be different types of art pieces, hand drawings, performances, photos, written, audio, different types of art pieces. Yes? All right. Again, I would expect that there would be attributes describing each one of the data types, the data pieces that are captured in each class. Make sense? All right. Feature requirements. So you would be expected to implement the following minimal pages, right? There will be a home page. The home page should look spectacular. It should explain to me what your application is all about. It doesn't need to be extra verbose, but it should explain itself what it is, right? Once you're famous like Google, then you can get away with just one single search bar, and that's it. Everybody knows what that search bar is. But until you're not Google, please explain what I should do. What should I type in there? Right? Give me an example or something. The homepage should also show some activity. right? What's going on in your application, right? Who has recently joined, or who has recently created a review of what movie, whatever, or somebody's following somebody else. Okay, so it should provide some semblance of activity in the application, in the community. Make sense? Right? It shouldn't just be just a title and a search bar. It should look useful. It should provide a mechanism for logging in and registering and logging in using regular username and password, but also using third-party authentication such as Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. At least one. Choose one. Okay. For the assignment, I believe I asked you to do Google, and for the project, you can do another one, Facebook, right, or LinkedIn, or whatever. There should be some kind of profile page where the user can maybe upload their photo, say something about themselves. Also, anything that the user is associated with, other users that they're following, any reviews that they've created, any comments that they've created, any movies they like, whatever interaction they've had with the rest of the application should be available somewhere, right, in the application. Presumably, one good place is to put it in the profile, but you can put it anywhere you want. But profile is a good choice. So from my profile, I should see, maybe a short list, a summary of all the movies I like, or all the movies I don't like, or whatever we want to keep track, whatever the database is keeping track of, right? If it's a review I wrote, it doesn't have to show the entire review I wrote, right? But at least maybe the title of the review I wrote. Yes, and I should be able to navigate to anything I am related to. If I'm related to a movie I reviewed, or I bookmarked, or I liked, or whatever, I should be able to click from my list and navigate back to the details page of that movie, or that song, or that sport team, or that match, or whatever thing I bookmarked, right? Or if I'm following a person or user, I should be able to click on that username, right, and navigate to the profile page of that other user. Yes? Okay. It should provide some search capability. Here's where you interact with a third-party API, right? Whether you're searching events around me, or restaurants around me, or recipes, or sports. I should be able to have a page where I type some title or some criteria, and it goes out to the remote API and comes back with a list of search results, right? And this could be in the same page, right? The search results. Some people like to put it in the home page. That's okay. They could put it in the home page, right? Or maybe at the top of the header, maybe a search item in there, search input field somewhere. But somewhere I need to be able to see, clearly these are the results from my search result, from my search criteria. Yes? Okay. The search result should be a summary of the results, maybe one line, or maybe a title and a short description, very short description, maybe a thumbnail. Okay. And when I click on that search result, it should navigate me to a details page, right? In that details page, it should show me more information about whatever I search for. Okay. If it's a movie, maybe it'll show me lots of poster images, right? Maybe it'll show me the cast of the movie, maybe the plot, the directors, right? The screenwriters, okay? And so all this is dynamic, right? None of this lives in your server, right? None of this lives in your database. All this is dynamically retrieved from whatever API you're using, okay? And the page is dynamically generated. And none of this needs for me to log in, right? I should be able to use this without logging in. If I like that particular movie, or I want to comment on that movie, then I'll need to log in so that the application knows who I am. In that case, the details page should also include some information that about any relationship you might have or you might have stored for that item, right? If a person liked the movie, well, this details page should say so-and-so liked this movie, right? Or if somebody commented on this movie, it should show down below, right, that this person created this comment about that movie. Make sense? Right? So this details page, it will be a mesh between two pieces of data. One remotely that you retrieve from the API, and down below, perhaps, right, the data that you have in your database, right, about that one item. Make sense? Okay. Notice that when you search and you go to a details page, not necessarily do you have a representation of that object in your database. You only have representation of that data only if you need to remember something about that thing, right? Only if somebody liked it, only if somebody commented on it, do you need to create a representation in your database. Yes? Otherwise, right, it's all dynamic, right? And we'll go back to that a little later. Some social networking feature, most people like to create like a follows, some person can search for another person and they follow them, right? Or some kind of messaging or some kind of mechanism that provides some social networking feature. Web service, so you have to choose some web service. Here is a good place to start. Programmable web is a repository of tons of APIs, right, which you can search by topic, right? And so you search weather, and then it comes back with the Weather Channel, Yahoo Weather. These are all free APIs, right, that you can query, right, and comes back with search results either using JSON, JSONP, or XML, or RSS, or whatever you want. Okay, so you can search by topic and see what APIs are out there. If it's not here, you can still search just plain old Google. Just say, your topic, public API or JSON API, right? JavaScript API, right? And it's very common that you'll come up with some API that fulfills your criteria. I would start doing that today. Try to find that API. Your application will be built around that API. Okay? You won't really know what you can do until you know what the API allows you to do. It is okay that your project is limited by what the API gives you. Okay? Don't come up with that you want to do something, but then you can't find the API that allows you to do that something, right? Unless you can do it from scratch. Okay, unless you can create that functionality from scratch, go ahead, right? But it is okay that if the API just doesn't allow you to do something, you just build around that. Okay, I think the most challenging part this week is identifying the domain and the API that you want to use, right? And read up on the documentation, and come, choose maybe three domains that might be your first choice, second choice, third choice, and see if you can find the APIs for those one of those domains. All right? Okay, I would get on this right away. That is the most time-consuming and is the most risky part of the project. Okay, that halfway through this, you realize that the API doesn't allow you to do something. Right? Some APIs you need to apply. And you need to create a contact information. You need to describe what it is you're going to do with that API, and then some of them are right away. They'll give you the key right away. Some of them might take a couple of days. So a couple of days in 6 weeks is a lot of time. So I would start this right away. User management. So if I log in as an admin, I should be able to manage users. Okay. Styling requirements. The styling, it needs to be responsive, right? So it needs to be useful at any size of the screen, right? That's one of the first things the TAs and myself are going to do, right? We're just going to resize your website, right? And see if anything breaks, right? If things starts to wrap and like push things around or overlap over some things, right? You lose points over that, right? So make sure that every time you add something, you make a change in your design, you're always resizing your page. See if it's fluid and is usable at any size screen. Okay, in particular, at really tiny screens, right? The right, if you do inspect, you can ask to see what it would look like at a particular device, right? You can choose your device and see what it would render as using that particular device. Okay, right? Notice that this is resizable. Okay, yours should not be resizable, right? This used to be needed when websites were not responsive, right? When the phones tried to render things the way they would look like on a desktop, right? So the fonts were really tiny and you couldn't read, right? And you had to zoom in to see what it read. But yours is going to look pretty just like this, right? There's no need to zoom in. See that? I don't need to zoom in to see this content, right? Because this website is properly responsive. Right? It knows that it's being viewed on a small screen. So the font did not scale down. Right? It stayed at its original size. Also notice the white spacing all around. Right? The same spacing all around. See that? The spacing on the left, spacing on the right. Okay, things should not be flush against any of the edges. Notice that everything is nice and aligned. Right? Okay, up and down on the right, on the left. Okay, all those things we're going to be looking for. Okay, that things are nicely aligned. There's nice use of white space. Right, things have nice spacing all around. Also notice the contrast. Right, a strong contrast between the foreground color and the background color. If you're going to use a lot of images, make sure that those images, they don't. You're not going to put content on top of it that is the same color as your background. Right, so you can't read, so make sure that the contrast is there. Let's see what else. You'll need to use some responsive library. We're going to be covering Bootstrap in this class, but if you prefer to use materials or foundations or some other grid layout system, feel free to use that. White spacing, padding, margins, justification, wrapping. Make sure things wrap correctly, right? As you resize, right? Typically, things. Notice this: the API news and API directory. As the size becomes smaller and smaller, it doesn't fit. An error is to have these start wrapping, right? If it doesn't fit, it would be like wrap and push things down and overlap other content, right? So be careful, right? So always do small, slowly resize your screens, right? Make sure that things are not pushing other things or wrapping weirdly and pushing things around or overlapping on top of other content. Be careful, okay? Right. So notice also the footer, the header. Is responsive and changing. See that? See, you lose points for that. See that how it wrapped because it doesn't fit, right? And it's pushing the content down below. So yours will not do that, right? It will know when to change the size and whatnot. Okay, all right. So be careful. Look and feel. It should look professional. It should look polished. It should look finished, right? That it's not in progress, right? That you did this at the last minute. Scroll bars. Be careful to use scroll bars. We don't want nested scroll bars. For instance, like this. See that nested scroll bars? No nested scroll bars. Okay. Also, notice that it allows you to resize, no resizing. Right? Yours should not allow you to resize unless it's justified. For instance, if it's an image, right, then it makes sense that you allow somebody to resize an image, right? But notice what's happening here. I'm resizing, and the entire website is resizing. See that? It should not allow me to do that. Right? If I'm going to resize an image, you should allow me to resize only the image, not the entire website. Make sense? Right? Or if I'm going to scroll, things that don't fit, okay, maybe a table doesn't fit because it has a lot of columns. Right? First, avoid creating long columns, lots and lots of columns, on a small screen. But nevertheless, sometimes it makes sense to use tables, right? But if it doesn't fit, the table should scroll, but not the entire page. Right? You should be able to scroll the table left and right, right? So the table should be responsive. And we'll go over all that a little later. Best practices, you have to make sure that we're going to go over all the entire semester. We're going to go over and we're going to drill you with lots and lots of best practices. And I would expect that your project follows best practices, industry standards. Right? So make sure that controllers don't use scope, that have init functions, that you're using immediately invoked function expressions, that you centralize all your web services in a web source layer. The file structures follows a particular structure. You follow a consistent naming convention, right? Deliverables. So again, these are the various milestones that I mentioned earlier. Okay, here if you look at the agenda, notice that this says assignment 1. Oh wait, my agenda. It says assignment 1, assignment 2. But at the end of next week, there is a project milestone due, right? So by the end of next week, milestone project 1 is due, right? You're going to go to programmable web by this time. You're going to make an entry in Git called project, and you're going to provide a 300 to 500 word description of what is it that you're building. It is okay if you change your mind a little later, okay? But I want you to start thinking now what you want to do. Right? I'm trying to push you to early decide what it is that you want to do. It is okay to change your mind a little later. I hope you don't, because it's a very small window, very little wiggle room. Right? It's very, very short. Right? If this were a semester, 14 weeks, okay, well, we have a little more time. But 6 weeks, 7 weeks is very, very short. Include, what is the problem you're trying to solve? It is okay if you're solving a problem that is already solved. If you want to create Facebook again, that's fine. All right, that's okay. It doesn't have to be unique. Right? It is okay if you have two folks doing the same idea, right? But it cannot be the same code base, right? Obviously. If you team up, and you then decide to break halfway through, you have to have separate ideas. Right? You can't start with an idea, right, and halfway through decide that you want to go separate and then submit exactly the same thing. All right? So be careful, right? If you want to go with someone. This happened to me a while back. Two folks started together, and almost at the end, they couldn't think of another user. Because they said, oh no, it's more complexity. I have to think of another user. Let's split up. And let's do one user. I do one user, and you do the same exact user on the other side. No. Okay. Start thinking about 3 types of users that would use this. You only need to implement 2, but have one on backup. Who would use this? Okay, who would use your application on human users? And then 3 domain objects. Are there playlists? Are there theaters? Are there movies? What are there? Now, for each human user, what would the user do using your application? What are 3 things that they would use? Right. So if I'm a buyer, I would like to search for items, for products. I would like to review those products. I would like to bid on them. I would like to whatever. What would a one sentence is enough, right? So for each user, tell me one sentence. What would the user do? Right? 3 things that the user would do. Also, list 2 relationships. What are the relationships for each user? How would they be related to that domain object? Well, I can create a comment. I can like it. I can review it. I can not like it. Thumbs down. Also, domain object. 2 relationships between domain objects like playlists, songs. So all that is by the end of next week, right? That's the end of next week. So along with assignment 2. So along with assignment 2, you should have this done by. We're not going to grade this until the very last, okay? But we're going to look at the timestamp on when you created it, right? In the wiki, it says when you created it, right? When you posted it. It should be thereabouts assignment 2, okay? Again, this is to discourage you from leaving this to the very last. Right? You're gonna go crazy if you leave this to the very last minute. The second, where is it? Here, with assignment, when you submit the next assignment, there'll be project 2 at the end of week 3. For that, you create a design, right? So create a UML class diagram, a preliminary class diagrams, right? What are your users? What are your data models? What are your domain objects? What pieces of information are you capturing for theaters, for movies, for users? What are you capturing? Username, password, first name, last name, title of the movie, rating, plot, director, cast. What pieces of data are you capturing? So it should look like the class diagrams that I just showed you earlier, right? Maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 classes about. So embed your class diagram in your wiki. In your third project here. Okay, right after we come back from Memorial Day weekend, I would expect that you have been playing around with your API. You have you've settled on an API, right? You've read the documentation. I want you to start playing with it, right? You start hitting it with queries. Yes, search the title for a movie. Search a particular movie and retrieve the data for that movie. Right, and just render it. So I'm asking you to create 2 experiments. One that allows you to. Oh wait, proof of concept. Wait, is that? Am I going? Okay, no, yeah, there. That allows you to query that API. That allow you to list domains that list objects that meet a search criteria, and then that allows you to render one particular object, right? This doesn't have to look pretty, right? It has to be just functional, right? But to demonstrate us that you did your due diligence, trying out and testing your API. Yes. Again, I don't want you to leave this to the end. And finally, project 4. This is again pushing you along. Get started on creating the login page, the registration page, the profile page, right? Get you going with that. For each one of these, you're going to create a wiki entry. And finally, the last 2 weeks, which typically would be last month, you'll be hopefully well on your way to just working on your project. Okay? All right. For the project, I'll need you to create certain users so that the TAs and myself can grade you. We'll log in using these usernames. Admin should be in role, the admin role. Alice, username, password will be role 1, whatever role you choose. Bob, Charlie, Dan, A, B, C, D. Obviously, you're not going to need all of them. Right? If you're an undergrad, you're only going to create these 2. If you're a single grad, you're going to create these 3. right? If you're in a team of 2, you're going to create these 4. If you're in a team of 3, you're going to create these 5. Make sense? Over it again. Okay. Optional 5 to 10-minute video. Some of you like to come and show me and keep me up to date what's going on. I think more efficiently record this in a 5-minute video and where you can show off your project. This is especially good if for some reason it used to work yesterday and today it's not working. Yes, it was working. I don't know what happened. If you here you have evidence that this at some point worked. Obviously you have maybe a partial credit, but at least you have some evidence that this did work at some point. In your 5 to 10-minute video, this will also allow you to show your project in its best light. Okay, it's your chance to show off your project and maybe some feature that we overlooked. I don't know, right? So again, it's your chance to sell your project to us. Your project should be accessible from the homepage. So that's how we're going to start. We're going to go to your homepage and click on project, and it should take us to your project, and we can start using it. And all your source code should be on GitHub or Bitbucket. Here's a rubric. This rubric is a little outdated. I'll have to update it. Anyway, the in Blackboard there will be a rubric that we'll use to grade you. It'll be available. You can see the rubric, right, with all the weight and all the points. Okay, all the assignments have rubrics. You can see all the rubrics beforehand. What else? Any questions? I think this is broad enough and general enough that it should take care, I think, of 80-90% of the projects that you might be thinking of. There's always that 10-20% of ideas that don't fit in here. For that, please come see me, and we can negotiate. All right. What I've done what I did last semester that worked pretty well. If you can't think of a user as an alternative, you can use an API, a second API, right? So you can swap a user for an API, right? And this worked well because folks tend to use more than one API anyway, right? So I think it's a fair trade. If you're using an additional API that has a complexity of having to deal with the idiosyncrasies of that one API, so I think it's a fair trade. If you can't think of an additional user, a fair trade is okay. Well, then use an additional API. Right? So you might use Google Maps API, right, plus some Yelp API, and together work that way. All right. Any questions? Yes.
Can I extend that trade-off idea in that if I want to implement some obscure logic or something that I think is innovative in my app?
Yes. Again, if it's within these boundaries, you don't have to ask for permission. If it goes beyond, or you think you have something that goes beyond the requirements, then we can certainly negotiate. Yep, we can negotiate. Okay.